In this video, we're going to talk about using images as backgrounds. I'm starting with the file we were just using that has images. I cleaned up the code a little bit. If you're wondering how I got the sort of invisible border around those images, I basically just used a border that has the exact same background as the background color of the article. So you can't see the border, but it is having the effect of making that oval shape. What we're really here to talk about is using images as backgrounds, and that's something that we do primarily in CSS. So the first thing you need to do is find some good background images, and you can easily do that with something like searching for abstract backgrounds and just take a look at what you find, and you can modify those searches to look for different colors and that sort of thing. Now, when we get to editing images, I can show you how to modify the color scheme of something that you find and crop and do some other things. So I've already gone through that process and found myself a few background images, and I have put these in my folder with the images. And again, just to remind you, we do want to keep all of our images together. This is going to be the page that I'm working on, and then this is where my images are going to be located. And remember, we always need to know that. We need to know where to find our resources in relationship to the file that we're currently coding. And you can see I've got a few here. And the idea for a background image, obviously, is you want something that's not too busy, that's going to make a good neutral palette, but that has some visual interest, that can be behind text if that's what it's for, something that's light enough that's not going to overpower, if, you know, again, if that's what it's for. So just keep those things in mind as you are selecting your background images. You got to think about what it's going to be used for. I have these three backgrounds at this point, and let's just take a look at some coding to figure out how to use these as background images in different elements of a site. The most obvious application is to put a background here where the white is, like a page background. In order to do that, you basically want to add the background to the body, right? The body is basically what is represented by all this white that's behind the page here. That's the element in the HTML that controls that area of the page. So we'll start with that. And the code that you need is, again, CSS, pretty straightforward, right? Background image. Now in this case, rather than src, which we use for images when we're coding our HTML tags, we actually use URL. And again, just giving the location of the source that we need. And we put this in parentheses, and then we use a quotation mark, enclosing quotation marks, the path, the referential path of the image file that we're looking for. And again, remember, we're doing images, and I'm going to use my background 03 for this particular one. And again, close our parentheses, close our quotations. And then take a look what happens. We have this background now behind the entire page. Now what's happening is, by default, it's going to be centered on our x-axis, and this is going to repeat. So if this page were longer, and again, I can do it in that kind of cheaty way, just increasing the zoom on the page, so then it just artificially creates a longer page. Okay, and so notice what happens there. It just keeps going. So what would happen is, if this image, if there were more space than required for the image itself, it would repeat by default. Our image scrolls along with us. Now, if we wanted to keep that image right in place, we can do that with the background attachment property and set that to fixed. And if we go ahead and reload that, now when we scroll, the image stays in place. So that's kind of neat. It makes it like fixed image in the background, and then the content scrolls on the page. Now notice, we do have to fix something here because our top link no longer has very good contrast. So we want to make sure that we can see that, and that's easy enough to fix. And notice here, we used that fixed, but it was with position. So position applies to the actual element itself. Background attachment fixed applies to the thing that's in the background. Okay, now we're going to change this to white should work. And that's a lot easier to see. So we're going to go with that. What about applying an image background to the header? Now, this may get a little bit too busy having the page background as well. But again, this is just playing around and just to show you how this can work. So so if I want to apply it here, I want to apply a background image here to a single element. I know that that's coded as my header in my HTML. So I want to go to the header section of my CSS, and this is where I'm going to play around. Now, notice I'm going to leave the background color property there, because if for some reason my image isn't available, like let's say I forget to upload it to the server, it will still have the background color to take effect. So I wouldn't end up with white text on a white background, which is what would happen if I had no color there at all. So the background color is just like a backup plan in case anything happens to your image for any reason. Okay, but let's go ahead and do this background image. And again, if you need to remember how to find your images, just go back to your website, your structure here in your file explorer, and you can see that it is in the images file, and I've got the BG01. And the most common error, speaking of debugging just for a second, is to have something wrong in the name, like misspelling, mistyping the name. That's why I try to keep my names very short and simple, because the fewer character strokes you have to type, the fewer chances you have to make mistakes. So now I have my background image coded in here. I'm going to go ahead and save that and reload. And now I have my image here. Now notice this image is smaller than the container that it is in, so it repeats, and it does that automatically across. Now we can use the background position to have it start as a centered image, right? So that's a little bit nicer, because now we've got our centered text and it's sort of centered in the image, and then the image goes out to the left and right, repeating along that x-axis. We can also tell it using our background repeat property. No repeat if we want to do that. And then we end up with just one of those. And let's say we did that, maybe we want another image that goes across the entire header. And if you want to sort of overlay multiple images within a single element, you want to do it in this way. Just one background image background image property, and then list your URLs. And the one that's listed first is always going to be the top layer, and then you're going to have subsequent layers with each image that you list. And I'll show you what I mean by the layering effect here. So I've got top layer is 01, and then the next layer is 02. That one is a wider image, so that covers the whole thing. So in this case, the positioning center and the no repeat is going to apply to both of the image layers, because there's just one value given. But I can also customize exactly what I'm doing there. So I could say left center, and then that's going to align this image to the left and then leave this one centered as it is. So you see how that worked. Now I could also use another version of this and put one of those on the left and one on the right, and then have that other image shining through in the center. The trick to doing that, though, just remember what I talked about with the layering. It's going to be from left to right, the topmost layer and then the nextmost layer and whatever. So if I want to have both the left and the right on top of the center image, I actually have to put those right next to each other, 1 and 2. Like so. And again, I'm using just exactly the same name here, BG01. And then here I want left, right, center, because I want this one to be left, this one to be right, this one to be center. And then when I reload that, so we get this kind of book-ended version here, and then the center is like this. So you can apply multiple images. They're going to layer topmost to bottommost image, and then you can apply the specific criteria. Make sure you keep the order the same in terms of how you've listed the images here, and then the criteria that you're listing here for how you want them to appear. And again, the no repeat, that is going to apply to all of those images, because it is simply, there's just one instance of it. So it's going to apply it to all of the different images that are listed up there. Now, I think actually for real, what I want to do is have a X repeat. And again, because of the height of this, the X and Y doesn't really make a ton of difference here in terms of the repeating, but just so you know, like when you have a larger container, you can just X repeat or just Y repeat. And again, that just is talking about X axis, Y axis on your Cartesian coordinate plane. And I think I'm going to do it like this so that I have my centered image then that's going to repeat off to the left and right. Oh, let me just note one other thing you can do here, and this is something I maybe should have talked to you about before. So I'm going to comment out this line for just a second. So commenting out, that just is using this / asterisk and then asterisk / basically anything that's between these symbols is going to be skipped over when the code is being compiled. So this is a good way of just sort of removing a line of code temporarily, but leaving it there so that I can make that active again at any moment. And if I wanted to, I could comment out multiple lines, and notice this is going to make my border go away now, right? And see it got rid of some of my other coding as well, which we do not want to do, but just get rid of that X repeat for a second. And what I'm going to do is use the background size. I just want to show you this real quick. So background size, you can actually give an explicit size to your background just like you can to an image. But one of the special attributes that you can assign here is cover, which just means it'll take that image and, in this case, because it's a smaller image, stretch it to cover the whole thing. If it were a larger image, it would shrink it to cover the area. Just depends on what the image proportions are in relationship to the container that it is covering. So there you can see how that works. Now, it doesn't work very well with this image because it really pixelates. It makes the image very blurry. So I don't like that. I'm not going to use it for this one. But if you have a high-res image, it could work very nicely to ensure that it's covering the entire container without having to use a repeat. If you don't like the lines that you can clearly see on the repeating, like this one, I don't think it hurts that much here. It almost looks like an open book, or open map, something like that. I kind of like that for the header. I'm going to leave that, and then I'm going to go to the nav, and I'm going to put in the other background image there. And remember, we want to make sure we have our folder, and then we want to make sure we have our folder and then our file name. Okay, and then take a look at how this one works. So remember, this particular image, it actually, when we had it up here, we could see more of it. It actually changes in color to a much more orangey version of itself. And if we really wanted to, we could get it to do a vertical center. And the way that you change the vertical alignment, there are two positioning values here. And this is the one that does the horizontal positioning. This is the one that does the vertical positioning. So you have to put in explicitly your horizontal positioning in order to make changes to your vertical positioning. If you put in just one, it'll assume that you're talking about horizontal. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then notice what happens. It now centers that vertically. Now that actually does not work as well because it ruins our contrast here. So I'm going to go put it back to what we had before. So the dark works much better with our link. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I just wanted to let you know how you can adjust the vertical alignment of your images. If you need to do so, you need to put in the horizontal alignment property first, a space, and then the vertical property. And the valid values are, top, bottom, and center for our vertical, and left, right, and center for our horizontal. So that shows you how to assign an image value to a background and how to position that background, just as some examples of the things that you can do using images as backgrounds. You can really do some things that look a lot more sophisticated on your web page by using those images.